Welcome, scholars, to Lesson 5-1.5, Mongols in China. This is going to be a summary lesson that delves into a lot of what we've already covered, because some of it was kind of complicated, as well as a few new details before I foreshadow a couple of things that are to come in our final lesson on the Mongols in China when we talk about the decline of the Yuan dynasty. So that's just a preview of what we've got today, and let's get to it. So we are talking here about China, and in China, going way, way back, they have been under dynastic rule. This goes all the way back to the Shah dynasty of 2050 BC. Now, quick little side note here, there is some suggestion that may be legitimate that this was a mythical dynasty, that it didn't exactly exist, but for the purposes of this lesson, we're going to pretend that they did, even though we don't really have solid evidence one way or another, and what evidence we do have suggests that they probably didn't exist. Anyway, Chinese history dates itself to this point, so we will too. Now, each dynasty is represents a ruling family. Remember, the idea of a dynasty is that it is a family that rules, and so long as that family is in charge, then we have the same dynasty. The Chinese believe that that dynasty will maintain that rule because they have something called the Mandate of Heaven. The Mandate of Heaven basically says, well, we rule because God wants us to, or the heavens want us to, and if the heavens didn't want us to, well, then we wouldn't be in charge. But the very fact that we're in charge must mean that the heavens want us to be in charge. And that's the basic principle of dynastic rule. Now, when we talk about the Yuan dynasty, they received the Mandate of Heaven when they were ruled by Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan conquers China in the 1260s. This is the completion of the earlier conquest. This is when the Song dynasty starts to fall apart. Now, Kublai Khan was, of course, one of the grandsons of Genghis Khan, that great Mongol ruler, Temujin, who we have spent so much time with. Now, when the Mongol Empire starts to fragment, Kublai is in charge of China and Mongolia, the wealthiest, most populous region of that Mongolian Empire. And from 1271 till 1368, so about 100 years, we can round that up, we'll call it 100 years. For 100 years, the Mongols ruled China, and this was the Yuan dynasty. Now, of course, the Mongols, we have been talking about the Mongols. We will talk about the Mongols for a little while still because they had so much influence. Mongol rule was both harmful and beneficial to the Chinese. They did great things, they did horrible things. One of the horrible things is the fact that nearly half of the Chinese population died during the Mongol conquest. That's half. Just look around your classroom and imagine half the people gone, your city, half the people gone, your country today, if half the people are gone. Think about that as the impact of a ruling culture. Now, some of this is, of course, the fault of the Mongols. Their direct rule, their direct actions was horrible. If you resisted the Mongols, they went in and they slaughtered your people. But more of that was due to the fact that the Black Death hit at the same time. So we can't really blame the Mongols for all of it, just a good chunk of it. Now, on the plus side, the Yuan rulers, those Mongol rulers, also unite China and expand their territory. China was never as united or as powerful and wealthy as they had been under the Mongols, not even during their so-called golden age of the Tang dynasty. Remember that? The Tang dynasty? That was a little while ago. But the Tang dynasty wasn't even this wealthy and this united. So the Yuan really did have this powerful, lasting impact on Chinese society. Beyond China, there is another impact that the Yuans are going to have. And this is partially because of the Yuans and partially because of this fella right here. This is Marco Polo. Marco Polo is a Venetian. He comes from Venice. Venice is a city in northern Italy. So he's an Italian, a European. He's a merchant and an explorer. And he travels first with his father and then later spends some time by himself in China. He travels to China. He spends some time there during the Yuan dynasty. He gets to know Kublai Khan on a personal level and is going to return many, many years later with stories of the wealth and the power of the Chinese. the Europeans really don't believe this wealth and power. Actually, Marco Polo is considered to be almost a fanciful writer, that he over embellishes everything that he writes. And certainly there were some embellishments, but really he's just writing about a society that is so advanced that the Europeans can't imagine the things that he's talking about, most of which were actually true. And the Europeans do get interested in this idea of China and this wealth of China. And eventually, other Europeans will seek China in large numbers to trade with this wealth and this power. During the Mongol rule, another positive, we see the Silk Road leading to this increase in exchange of goods and ideas between Europe and China. This was a very positive thing for the Europeans and the Chinese in many important ways. All goods, though, had to first pass through the Middle East. You see here this Silk Road routes, the ones by sea or the ones by land. In both cases, they're passing through Persia, Arabia, Egypt on their way. Oh, and India. That's kind of an important one. Got to remember that one. India, Persia, Arabia, and Egypt on their way to Europe. So all this exchange is being facilitated by the Indians, Persians, Egyptians, and Arabs. When Mongol rule is eventually overthrown, all of that constant free flow of trade is interrupted. It's going to be interrupted by these guys, the Gunpowder Empires. These are the people who eventually seize control for extended periods of time along this Silk Road trade. At the end of Mongol rule, these empires are going to rely on this Silk Road trade. They draw a lot of their income from it. They are the Ottomans, these guys, the Safavids, these guys, and the Mughal Empire over here. And they're going to rely on this and want to control it, and in all cases want to expand to some degree. And they're going to do this using a very Mongolian invention, gunpowder. Let me correct myself there. Gunpowder was invented by the Chinese. It was the Mongols who so effectively weaponized it. Now, these empires are going to expand upon the Mongols' weaponization of gunpowder and making it such a successful implement of war. And it's from these empires that the modern usages of gunpowder and artillery and cannons and rifles and etc. really come into popular use. As they were the first, they come to very quickly dominate this region, become very important global powers. And we'll talk we have talked to some degree about these empires already. They are very important on the world stage, and this is where they're coming from. Thank you for following along with today's lesson summary of what we've covered. And next time we will be looking at the downfall of the Yuan dynasty.